Now, it says, in those days, the word of God came to me, and I said, Noah, behold, your lot has ascended up to me, a lot void of crime, a lot beloved and upright. Now then, shall the angels labor at the trees? But when they proceed to do this, I will put my hand upon it and preserve it. That's the key one right there. The angels shall labor at the trees. How interesting. Now, in other parts of the book of Enoch and other extra biblical texts and things like that as well, the trees are not only referred to as trees, but lofty trees. And that's really important. Lofty means grand or so much bigger than your average or your regular, right? So it talks about the lofty trees all throughout these various texts. And then it goes on to say, the seed of life shall arise from it, and a change shall take place. And the dry land shall not be left empty. I will establish your seed before me forever and ever. And okay, so that's pretty much where I'm going to stop that quote right there. We're focusing on the angels will labor or work on, right? Do something to the trees. Now, another translation, just to be fair, there's various ways these things are translated. Being one who studies, languages and etymology and word origins and things like that. But it's all context. You put all of the context together and you put all of the clues together, not just from one book, but from the world's record, right? It's comparative mythology. One translation says, they shall labor at the trees, or it could be said, are making a wooden structure. The angels are making a wooden structure. What are the angels doing? Now, angels, as I've talked about in some of my other videos, there's other words for that, okay? I believe this is a direct reference to the Titans of old, or maybe the, certain factions of elven race had something to do with this as well. But let me cut to the chase. I'm talking about the no forests on flat earth theory, right? The theory that, I'm trying to pop up the chat here as I talk. The theory that we once had a realm that was beautiful. It was a garden paradise. Everything was majestic and grand, including these gigantic silica pillars that we refer to as giant trees that once existed, that shot up past the clouds and went into the heavens, into another realm, and connected downwards into the realms below us as well. They were a sort of portal into other worlds. And this is where we get stories like Jack and the Beanstalk, where he climbs up this pillar and he ends up in the land of the Titans or the giants, right? And there's a lot of other stories that correlate and touch on this idea, right? So that's why I put these pictures up right here for you to use your imagination and get an idea of what it must have been like. So we see the evidence for these trees, or as I call them, the silica pillars, all around us. And they're in movies, they're in books, and they're all over the place if we just have the eyes to see them. Now, they have been cut down. Our world was terraformed. That paradise was destroyed. It was carved down. Now, was it carved down just because there was a bunch of angry titans just, slobbering all over the place like a caveman and they just wanted to kill things and destroy things? I'm not sure. I know that's the picture that we're painted. Excuse me. So I'm getting over a cold. That's why I keep coughing. So the world was torn down. All of those giant silica pillars that reached up into the heavens, into other realms, those trees were chopped down. They were cut down for some reason. And it falls to us to try to reverse engineer history and figure out why. What had happened? Who cut it down? With what? Where did it go? What happened? Right? But look at this. This is evidence. Society and the world at large would try to have you believe that this is just erosion. Wind and rain over time just carved out this perfect tree stump right there in the middle of nowhere, and it didn't have any effect on the surrounding areas whatsoever, okay? I don't believe it. I call BS on that. As a matter of fact, I wish I had I used to follow this channel called BS Detector, and he cracked me up. He was so funny. That's beside the point. Okay, let me read some more verses from the book of Enoch. So I'm going to repeat that verse from the book of Enoch, just that one particular, chapter 66, verse 2. Now then shall the angels labor at the trees, but when they proceed to do this, I will put my hand upon it and preserve it. It's interesting to me that it says preserve it. It's talking about the trees, but then it says preserve it, as in singular, right? I have a theory. I wonder if there is still the world tree at the center of our Middle Earth up at the North Pole, what we call the North Pole. A lot of people speculate that that one has been chopped down as well, but I think that was the main one, and maybe the reason why it's so difficult for anybody to get to the North Pole is not because of extreme temperatures, but because you can only go to a certain distance from this world tree before you can start to see it due to perspective and line of sight and things of that nature, right? I mean, you would think that everyone would just be able to see it, but that's not the case when it comes to breaking down perspective, right? You can still have a world tree up there at the North Pole that still exists. I lean towards it still existing. I'm not sure, but that's a theory that I have. Now, I'm going to read some more quotes from Enoch that I feel are very relevant. This is from chapter 82. I'm going to read the verse in particular, verse 6. It says, actually, let me back up. I'm going to read starting at verse 2. It says, I'll start at the first one. And now I have shown thee, my son, Methuselah, every sight which I saw prior to thy birth, right? I will relate another vision which I saw before I was married. They resemble each other. The first, when I was learning a book, and the other, before I was married to thy mother. I saw a potent vision, and on account of these things besought the Lord. I was laying down in the house of my grandfather, Machalel, when I saw in a vision heaven purifying and snatched away. And when it says heaven, it's talking about the sky, right? Our dome of the heaven above us. And falling to the earth. So he saw the heaven falling to the earth. He saw the sky falling, right? The sky can't fall. Physical things fall down, right? So something physical up above us called the heavens, he saw in a vision falling down to the earth, just like Chicken Little, who says, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. We make fun of that, but that hits home to me. That feels like there's some truth there, that the sky has the capability to fall. Something above us that we look at and we call the sky or the heavens or the expanse or space or whatever, has the ability to one day break apart and fall downwards. So the next verse says, and falling to the earth, I saw likewise the earth absorbed by a great abyss, and mountains suspended over mountains. Hills were sinking upon hills. Lofty trees were gliding off from their trunks and were in the act of being projected and of sinking into the abyss. Lofty trees were gliding off of their trunks and were in the act of being projected and sinking into the abyss, sinking into what we call the ocean these days, right? This blows my mind. This amazes me. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why we don't explore the ocean. We'll go to the shallow parts and make some, National Geographic special about, look what we've seen 200 meters down or whatever. But those really deep parts of the ocean, we don't share those with people. Now, I know there have been some specials, where people have taken a submarine and it's gone so far and they make you feel all afraid because they show the window crack and, they land and they just see a dust cloud forming and you don't see anything. I believe that there are all kinds of remnants of an ancient world down at the bottom of the ocean, because I believe that the ancient world was fossilized. It was turned into stone, which I've talked about in a few of other of my videos. For more information about that, check out the last one I did. It's about mud fossils, and it's got a picture of a statue. I forgot what I titled it. I'm sorry. So let me reread that. Hills, this is a vision that he saw. Hills were sinking upon hills, lofty trees, not regular trees, lofty trees, silica pillars. I'm paraphrasing. Were gliding off from their trunks and were in the act of being projected and sinking into the abyss. That amazes me. So let me read something else. What else do I have here? Oh, I want to talk about there's a verse in here about the giants. There's a lot of really good little nuggets. Isn't that a great picture? Thank you to the Dictionary of Truth, by the way. That's her picture that she found. So let me read this as well. This is from chapter 16, verse 1. It says, "And as to the death of the giants, wheresoever their spirits depart from their bodies, let their flesh, that which is perishable, be without judgment. Thus shall they perish." Thus shall they perish until the day of the great consummation of the great world. A destruction shall take place of the watchers and the impious. Let their flesh be without judgment. Now, the alternative rendering of that is also here. There's a few alternatives. The way people interpret the wording, right? And the context and things like that. But it says, instead of let their flesh be without judgment, it says, or their flesh shall be destroyed before the judgment. So what this is saying to me is that it says, as to the death of the giants, the titans, wheresoever their spirits depart from their bodies, right? So they die. The spirit leaves the body. That point of focus leaves the body. Now you just have the vessel, right? Let their flesh, which is perishable. So that's a given. You know, the flesh is perishable. It'll rot away, right? It points that out because of what's coming next. Let their flesh, which is perishable, be without judgment. So the judgment of the flesh is for it to rot away. The judgment of the flesh is to decay and to go away, to disappear, to return to the earth and to, rot, basically. But let it be without judgment, meaning don't let their flesh decay and rot. Now this ties right into mud fossil theory because the flesh literally turned into stone. So their bodies were to be kept intact, whole, for the most part, until this quote-unquote day of judgment when their bodies would pass away. Now, just as a side note, without too much doom and gloom, how is that possible that the stones and the rocks, which are ancient, our ancient world turned into stone, how can that pass away? How can that be judged at the end? Well, because there will be, according to the same types of books and scriptures and writings from various religions and cultures, there will be a great fiery end or beginning to our world. And that fire will be so hot that it will basically melt all of these things, okay? And it also says that, like the oceans will disappear and whatnot. But if you want to know more about that, check out my video called The Revelation Sun Remastered. Anyhow, I was really excited to hear these verses in the book of Enoch. Now, I wanted to share my own in the book of Enoch. There's so many good breadcrumbs in there. I'm going to switch gears for a moment, stop talking about the giant trees, and actually talk about the El, or the Elohim, or the Elu, or the Ilv, the Alf, the Elves, the elven race, basically, that we call the gods or the angels or things of that nature. Now, I've done many videos talking about what they look like. They were albino in their look. They weren't actually albino with red eyes and stuff, but they were pure white. They had this porcelain white, scaly type of silica-based skin, or their vessel, their bodies were silica-based. And they were this pale, pasty kind of white color. And all of these various religions and cultures and historical records from around the world and across time all refer to this quote-unquote white race that descended from the mountains. They were on the mountains because there was a giant flood everywhere, right? And they knew about it. So they went up to the tops of the highest mountains to wait it out until the waters went down. Then they came down from the mountains and met the survivors, those people who had survived. Or, perhaps they created some of their own. Sorry, just getting comfortable in my little chair. So anyhow, In the book of Enoch, in chapter 106, it talks about the birth of Noah. And I want to read this because I feel like this is important, you know. This is one of the reasons, all of these verses are the reasons why I feel like this book was left out of the canonization or the official making of the Bible itself. Because there are so many truths to be revealed. Now, you can't hide all of the truth. There's always going to be little bits and pieces that I call breadcrumbs, evidence left behind for us to put the pieces together, right? So it says in chapter 106 of Enoch, this is the birth of Noah. And after some days, my son, Methuselah, took a wife for his son Lamech, and she became pregnant by him and bore him a son. And his body was white as snow and red as a rose. The hair of his head was white as wool, and his diadema, I don't know what that is, sorry, was beautiful. And as for his eyes, when he opened them, the whole house glowed like the sun. Rather, the whole house glowed even more exceedingly. This isn't, time out, this is not metaphorical. This is literal. People would try today to push this as being poetic. You know, the birth of Noah was just so wonderful because he's Noah, you know, so it's just so poetic. No, it's very literal. This is a literal translation of what had happened. Here's how you know it's literal, because of what comes next. It goes on. And when he arose from the hands of the midwife, he opened his mouth and spoke to God with righteousness. Right? Now, here's something many people don't know. With these ancient beings, they weren't like we are today. They were born accelerated, if that makes sense. They were born smarter than we are today. It takes us a very long time to gain wisdom, to gain knowledge, and to learn and things like that. Back then, I don't think it was like that. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. So, it says, his father, Lamech, was afraid of him and fled and went to Methuselah, his father. Right? So he went to Noah's grandpa, and he said to him, I have begotten a strange son. He is not like an ordinary human being, but he looks like the children of the Malachim of heaven. Malachim has been loosely translated as the angels or the sons of God. Malachim literally means the kings, the rulers of the world. Okay? So let me read that again. I have begotten a strange son. He is not like an ordinary human being, but he looks like the children of the Malachim of heaven to me. His form is different, and he is not like us. His eyes are like the rays of the sun, and his face is aglow. That kind of sounds like Superman, doesn't it? Now we take all of these, we know that truth is given to us in the guise of fiction. Superman is a true story. I mean, you have to see past all of the cartoonish caricature types in it, but it's a true story. Laser beams coming out of his eyes, being stronger than steel, all of this type of stuff, right? So, it goes on. It does not seem to me that he is of me, meaning he's not my son. It can't be. But of the Malachim. And I fear that a wondrous phenomenon may take place upon the earth in his days. So I'm beseeching you now, begging you, in order that you may go to his grandfather Enoch, our father, and learn from him the truth, for his dwelling place is among the Malachim. He's basically saying, hey, Enoch is human, right? And he's like you guys' best friend or whatnot. Enoch was a scribe, okay? And the angels, the gods, the elven race, they took a liking to him. They saw his best attributes. They saw all of the potential that humanity had in Enoch. So they took Enoch under their wing in order to pass down their most secret and deepest teachings so that he can pass them on to us. He was our first librarian, so to speak. So I think that's all of the, that's really all I wanted to share tonight. I'm going to jump in the chat as well. So I want to say thank you to everybody for making so many of the things that I do possible. I never thought it would be possible. to do what I do and to present these things. And people would actually care and listen and be intrigued and inspired to go on their own and to look at the world differently and to share information as well. So thank you, all of you as well. We're going to be using this guy, right? I can't wait. And I can't thank you all enough. It means so much to me. So yes. Oh, by the way, I want to talk about the Titans as well. You see that? That's the Burj Khalifa, okay? That's the tallest building in the world as far as I know. And the giants, in the book of Enoch, it talks about how tall the giants were. And it varies, you know what I mean? If we were to talk about how tall human beings are today, I couldn't give you an exact answer. So if I wrote out a record for future generations and I was like, so human beings were all 5.5 feet tall. That's not exactly true. That's sort of an average of what I've experienced in my time on my path, right? In the book of Enoch, at a particular point, he talks about them being 300 cubits, I believe, right? Now, it could be 300 cubits. It could also be, I believe it was 300 ells, right? Now, let me give you an example. The short end of that is the cubit. A cubit is 18 inches, approximately the distance from your fingertip to your elbow. So if that ever comes up on Jeopardy, you can answer that question, right? That's how they measured things back then, right? It was basically this from here to here. That was a cubit. That was a unit of measurement back then. They also had, spans and hand lengths and things like that. So it was a cubit. 300 of those is about 450 feet tall. I will be showing everybody exactly how tall 450 feet really is. Now keep in mind, that's the short giants. That's the short end of the Titans, and that's the short end of the spectrum. Maximum I've come across, as far as giving measurements for the Titans, the tallest I've come across was, I think it was about maybe a mile. I want to say like close to a mile, just short of a mile tall. That's huge. Not only that, but it makes sense that you would need these flood waters, this deluge, this water cataclysm that destroyed Atlantis and the world we live in and everything in order to get rid of these types of guys, right? And it's not that they just drowned because all they could do was doggy paddle, right? But there's all this debris from all the stuff that they had torn apart. They terraformed our world. They left these valleys, right? Not valleys like you would think of, like there's a hill over here and there's a hill over here. I'm talking about the valleys of the ocean, the abyss, the bottoms of our realm. It's the terrible valleys that are discussed in various ancient literature and scriptures. Those are the valleys that the giants died in, the Titans died in, and were buried in, and will remain in for the time being. So, thank you. Darren Anderson says, Jay, you are a very inspiring teacher. Thanks. You're very welcome, and thank you as well. Brandon Morgan says, JayDreamerZ, I didn't get to watch your live streams that often because I have to get up early on weekdays. I think you would reach a lot more people if you did it more often on weekends. That's a great point, but I have my son on the weekends. So, I've got to spend quality time with him. I hope you can appreciate that. Let's see, what else do we have here? I'm just looking at the chat before we wrap things up. Does anyone have any questions or feel like maybe I left anything out? Sometimes I kind of rush into this because I live off of inspiration and energy, A lot of times when I do my live streams, it's not something that I've planned out and I've clipped together a bunch of, wonderful things for people to see. It's spur of the moment. It's last minute. I literally just jump on and, speak my mind because I'm in the moment and I'm passionate about it right then and there. So I want to talk to you about it right then and there. All right, let's see if there's anything interesting going on in the chat here. Claudius L. Rogers says, in Dante, ancient giants are at the center of gravity, bigger than Satan. Dante is a road to heaven, but first goes to hell first, because you got to keep away from the hungry she-wolf. When she eats, greedier she gets. You know, that's interesting too. I did this video that I really like. It doesn't have a lot of views, and that's fine. But it's called Tree Portal Theory. And it talks about how you can see all of these examples of these trees being portals into these other worlds. You know, off the top of my head, I can think of Alice in Wonderland. She goes through a tree. She opens a door in a tree and she ends up in another world. You can look at The Nightmare Before Christmas. Jack Skellington goes into this forest, and there are these trees that he can enter into and go into other worlds, other realms. The Princess Bride, they go into a tree and they go into this subterranean other world. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. There's a lot of these examples. Stranger Things, right? They climb into this tree and they end up in like this, I forgot what it's called, the Underdark or the Upside Down, right? Very interesting stuff, especially when you correlate tree to these beanstalks, these giant silica pillars, these portals that reached up into the heavens, that lived and hail from an altogether different world than we're used to, and then a different world than we are taught about. So I'm going to wrap things up. Thanks for watching, everybody. You guys have a great night, and I look forward to so much more with you all. I'll see you later. Bye.
Be sure to check out other fascinating subjects brought to you by JayDreamerZ.